CoinPilot channel. To receive updates of all cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin news and views, remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon below to receive notifications. Enjoy the video.
Power of Bitcoin. Bitcoin hits a new high, briefly touching $8,100 over the weekend. A new all-time high as the cryptocurrency moves closer to the mainstream. We are gearing up for the busiest shopping day of the year, Black Friday and Cyber Monday. How far off are we from swapping our credit cards for Bitcoins? Joining us right now is Overstock.com founder and CEO Patrick Byrne. Patrick, it's always a pleasure to see you.
Maria, always my honor to be on.
Well,
Thanks.
you were here telling us how great Bitcoin is and that you should just stop with all of the negativity out there. What's going on? I mean, are you not worried to see this sort of like in bubble territory, which some people would say, $8,100?
You think that's a bubble. What do you think this fiat currency you carry around in your purse is? This dollar stuff is just some fiat currency based on debt, based on fractional reserve.
Based on the trust of the U.S. government, you mean? Based on the trust of the Treasury?
Based on the surplus taxing authority of the U.S. Treasury, of which I assert there is zero. It's based on nothing. It's fractional reserve banking, Keynesian magic money tree, garbage money. It's about time the world switches. It's about time the world switches to real money, either gold or some cryptocurrency like Bitcoin.
You're saying Patrick, when people are out shopping for the holidays over the next few weeks, they're going to be using dollars and not Bitcoin. So on what basis do you have this optimism for Bitcoin when people aren't? I mean, a currency is only as good as people's use of it to exchange goods and services. And where do you see that happening on the Bitcoin front?
Well, for now, you know, it's an oddity. It's about 0.2%, 0.25% of our sales. It's a real oddity. Very few people use it. It turns out a lot of people who buy it just buy it and hold it. They have a name for them. They just buy and hold it because they know it's, you know,
it's called speculation.
Well, no, they buy it and hold it because they think it's going to get, well, they don't want to use it as currency yet because they think the first time somebody bought something with Bitcoin, they spent 10,000 Bitcoin on a pizza. It was about $5 worth of Bitcoin back then. And today that would have been an $80 million pizza. So people do hold it. But I think someday that it's really what's happened in other countries is the adoption goes up when the fiat currency collapses. So if you ever see a dollar crisis and the U.S. dollar ever collapses, that's when you'll really see Bitcoin emerge.
But see, the one thing that, Patrick, people never talk about is the dollar is backed, in essence, by hard assets. It's backed by our gold reserves. It's backed by the land that the United States owns. We have a lot of hard assets that, in part, back our currency.
However, there's two other things to know about it. When that it's really backed by the taxing authority of the Treasury. But I would assert the U.S. Treasury has maxed its taxing authority, which is why we run these deficits. If they could have more to tax, they would. You know, when Janet Yellen a few years ago, every month she signs a piece of paper and 85 billion new dollars were created. I'd love to talk about the metaphysical property of that garbage versus at least something that is, yeah, it's imaginary, but it's at least limited by the laws of mathematics. There's a limit on how much Bitcoin can ever be created.
The reason these arguments don't resonate with people because it always comes across as if people who believe in Bitcoin or back Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies are trying to create fear among people about our very currency and are trying to start a run on it.
I think they're trying to create awareness of what we have. 104 years ago, we adopted a very strange model of money that says the banking that will have a central bank, which incidentally has a very special checking account with zero in it, but by law, no check can ever bounce.
Right.
So they can buy, there's this crab nebula, so to speak, in astronomical terms, of the entire financial system is a magic checking account that can never be overdrawn. You tell me a system that's balanced on that, multiplied by leverage and fractional reserve banking and Keynesian spending, deficit spending, actually has a stronger metaphysical reality to you than something that's actually governed
Patrick,
by the laws of mathematics?
You talk about when currencies collapse in other countries. Well, what happens is people go out and buy dollars when currencies collapse in other countries. In fact,
and where are they going to go
when there was a financial crisis 10 years ago? People went out and bought U.S. Treasury bonds. So, you talk about the metaphysical, but when people are actually taking action, they want dollars. In countries with no stable currency, like Iraq, for instance, the $100 bill is one of the most valuable assets you can get your hands on.
Of course, the United States has had this incredible edge since World War II. Our currency is the reserve currency. We get to print what the world currently accepts as a reserve currency. Well, maybe that's not going to last forever. In the long term, the value of all fiat currency has gone to zero.
But there aren't even enough of them. I mean, how many bitcoins are there? There's a limit to how many are actually even in circulation.
Well, there's 22 million theoretically possible. It'll take us until 2050 to get there. There's about 12 or 13 million in circulation now, but they're divisible up down to a millionth of a slice. So how's it working for you?
Overstock was the first major online retailer to accept bitcoins. It's still among a handful of companies that are actually using it. Expedia, Dish Network, also using the Fold app. You can use bitcoin to pay for Starbucks. How's it going using it going into Black Friday? You're going to have a problem if you're really busy and too many people are using Bitcoin to buy things on Friday?
No, it's we won't have a problem. It works just fine.
How are you preparing for it?
Well, we stress test our systems. We just finished a couple of weeks ago stress testing our systems for Christmas. All systems go. And believe me, we can take all the Bitcoin that people have to spend. Our systems will handle. I expect you'll see us next year start giving a 2% rebate for anyone who spends in Bitcoin.
What percent of your sales are happening in Bitcoin?
Very tiny, 1/4% now.
So I've got a question, because you said this is all imaginary. You've got $8,100 as the price for it as of Sunday, and you don't think this is a bubble. What's it based on? It's so philosophical, and I'm not really sure that. How can you say it's not a bubble if we don't understand what it is?
Because the real question is not how high can Bitcoin go. The real question is how low can fiat currency go. And at the end of the day, all fiat currencies through the centuries have gone to zero. And that's because they end up with irresponsible money printing, such as our government's been involved in for 3 decades.
Well, so look at the pound as an example. The Bank of England, has been in existence for centuries, and the pound is still a very viable global. I mean, it isn't the reserve currency of the world like it used to be, but people are doing lots of business in London with the pound every single day. So that hasn't gone to zero. The dollar hasn't gone to zero. I don't understand the zeros you're talking about.
Well, 80 to 100 years ago, it took you $35 to buy 1 ounce of gold. Now it takes you $1,200 and 800 pounds to buy 1 ounce of gold. So wouldn't you say that the gold has gone up and the dollar and the pound have collapsed against the gold? They have collapsed. But because all the fiat currencies in the world are all tied to each other.
But gold isn't relevant in our lives. We spend as much money every year on dry cleaning as we spend on gold. It's just not irrelevant.
That's a non sequitur. That's not the main event. The main event is we have all these currencies since Bretton Woods fluctuating against each other, and maybe dollar hasn't gone to zero against these other currencies, but all of them have gone down 95%, the dollar has in the last century, versus something that they can't control, like gold, something with a limited supply, like gold or Bitcoin. So Bitcoin may be on its way to $1 million.
You're saying that there's been inflation, but that's true. But it's also the case that our wages are going up every year. So the real purchasing power of a person's time is going up in keeping with inflation. Real incomes are still rising, so this inflation, it's also a figment of the imagination.
Well, I'm sorry, Maria.
We will see where this goes in terms of that. I mean, you got people like Jamie Dimon, a serious guy, calling it a fraud.
Calling a fraud? You mean like those hundreds of billions of dollars of securities that Jamie Dimon sold the public a decade ago called mortgage-backed securities? He's calling Bitcoin a fraud. Is that going to go to zero like his securities that he sold the public go to zero?
Well, the CME is obviously making room for it and going to be trading it. Patrick, let me ask you before you go, we're going into Black Friday. What does it look like in terms of orders, in terms of your expectations for shopping? Because we're talking all morning that there are sales. The sales have begun. That can't be good news.
Well, it looks good. Looks like a strong holiday season. Internet shopping is, of course, here to stay. It's 10% of retail, but everybody, there's just this long secular shift from brick and mortar to retail. Although I've said repeatedly for a couple of years, I think the gods of economics think the right model is brick and click. And I even mentioned in our last earnings call, we actually engaged Guggenheim to explore alternatives, because I think that the right thing for Overstock is to become part of a brick and click, whether we acquire or somebody acquires Overstock. So we have that process going.
So are you basically on the block then?
Well, we're shopping or on the block or looking for a strategic investor. You know, we've done everything we've done, having burned $160 million of capital in our lifetime. We're up against people who burn $1 billion, $200 million a year, one competitor, and nobody seems to care. So we're looking either for a big strategic investor, or I really want to focus on these blockchain things. And
who would be your ideal investor right now? Who would be your partner?
There are a number of brick and mortars who feel that Wall Street, or who Wall Street feels don't have as strong a digital strategy as they should. We'd be a perfect hybridization with one of them. Or there are some companies, everyone's in boardrooms across America see themselves getting disrupted by Amazon.
Yeah.
A lot of them are brick and mortar companies. Some of them are logistics companies. Very soon you're going to be giving packages to Amazon to deliver on the other side of the country. So for a lot of different kinds of companies, Overstock's an incredible solution.
All right, we will leave it there. Patrick, always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much.